All right, a happy weekend to everybody out there. I want to talk some Sixers real quick on this Friday night, and I'm recording this before the Sixers play the Pistons in Detroit. And honestly, in the grand scheme of things, you can look at this matchup against the Pistons as a matchup between the 3 and 4 teams in the Eastern Conference. Obviously, there are playoff implications right there, but to me, the Pistons are a pretender. And I want to see how the Sixers play against some of the contenders. And the other night in Toronto, it was the perfect opportunity to see where this Sixers team was in a matchup between two teams that were some of the hottest squads in the NBA. The Sixers heading into Toronto the other night, 9-1 in their last 10, really having the wheels in motion since that Jimmy Butler trade, getting more and more acclimated with that big three of Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and Jimmy Butler. Toronto, on the other hand, they've been terrific all year. Big credit to Nick Nurse, Masai Ujiri, and of course Kawhi Leonard, who is a bona fide MVP candidate right now. They've got the best record in the NBA, and you saw on Wednesday night the gap between Toronto and Philly is a big one. And when you look at the Sixers, there's a concerning trend that continues to surface, dating all the way back to last year when the Sixers were just outplayed and looked outclassed by the Boston Celtics. Looked like an inferior team. Looked like a team that was not as well coached as the Boston Celtics. You got to give Brad Stevens the edge over Brett Brown. But in that series last year, the Sixers, no doubt, had the two best players on the floor, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. Kyrie Irving, out for the Celtics. Gordon Hayward, not in the lineup because of that nasty, horrific injury that he suffered in the first game of the regular season against Cleveland last year. But what's that trend that continues to surface? It's the fact that when the Sixers have to play some of the contenders, some of the elite teams in the NBA, they're just not the same squad, especially on the road. And the identity of the Sixers right now, to me, they are like a bully. Why? Well, you look at a bully, right? He walks around with his chest puffed out, his chin up, flexes his muscles a little bit when he knows he's around dudes who are smaller than him. Guys who he knows he can push around a little bit. Get under their skin. Push their buttons. That's what a bully does. But as soon as a bully gets confronted by someone who is just as tough, just as big, who can fight just as well as that bully can, that's when that bully crawls into its shell. And to me, that's what the Sixers look like right now. They'll go up against some of the pretenders in the league, some of the mediocre to bad teams around the association, and they'll look like a great team. Joel Embiid flashes MVP-type potential. Ben Simmons looks like the modern-day Magic Johnson. But as soon as the Sixers have to go on the road, take on a team like Toronto, their flaws get exposed. Now, I know Embiid is playing historical minutes right now, some of the most minutes in the league right now. Not sustainable when you're a 7-foot, 280-pound center who moves around and plays with reckless abandon like Embiid does. But he looked tired against the Raptors. Turned the ball over. Was sluggish. It's one of his worst games as a pro. And for the Sixers to make the jump into being a contender, they're going to need Joel Embiid to carry him. And so far I've seen 3 guys really in the league that always find a way to give Embiid trouble. Because they're just as big, just as physical, and they don't back down from him. That's Al Horford, Aaron Baines, and Serge Ibaka. Guys that Embiid will have to play against deep into the playoffs. He's got to be better. He's got to be better on the big stage against some of these top teams in the league. Embiid, he plays bully ball against guys he knows that he can handle, but struggles against guys who are just as physical. He's sitting out against Detroit, much needed rest. I was looking forward to him bringing the uppercut to Andre Drummond once again because he owns that matchup. He needs the rest. Sixers play Detroit again on Monday. And he'll bully Andre Drummond again. He'll have that confidence. He'll get the crowd to get up off their seats and make some noise in Philly, but I want to see Embiid go on the road and play like he does against guys he knows he's better than. Same can be said for Ben Simmons. When he knows that he's matched up against a player who he's bigger, more athletic than, can beat off one step, Ben Simmons is great. But when defenders can go stride for stride with Ben Simmons, and when teams, the best teams in the league, when they clog the paint and they game plan for Ben Simmons, he's not the same player. Doesn't have the same confidence, doesn't have the same gusto. Turns the ball over far too much. And that's a problem for this team at this current moment. Because in order for the Sixers to be one of the elite teams in the league and contend to win the East and be a finals favorite, Embiid and Simmons have to carry them. Those are the two faces of the franchise, and they have to be better against teams that are just as good, if not better than them. And that's the trend that I've seen surface continuously over the last year plus. Also, flaws for the Sixers when they have to go on the road, play in front of a raucous crowd. Not only do Embiid and Simmons not look like the same guys, but their bench is exposed a little bit. They're not deep like a Toronto. That's also an issue for this team moving forward. Now, is the reason to panic? I wouldn't say panic right now. Are there signs for concern? That, I would say yes to. Sixers play like bullies right now. Now, they're still young. They're still inexperienced. The process has been elevated and quickened with the ascent of that core. But the Sixers don't look ready to compete and contend. And they don't look like one of the top teams in the league. And it's all gotta change with the play of Embiid and Simmons against superior teams and on the road in tough environments. That was a big matchup against Toronto. Perfect opportunity to see where the team was. 9-1 in their last 10 heading into that matchup. Great measuring stick game. And they fell short. Didn't look like a team that was ready to contend. Now, what's the bright spot? It's that I think this team is going to get much, much better. A lot of season left. A lot of meat left on the bone in the 2018-19 season. That Jimmy Butler trade, still somewhat fresh. The team is still getting acclimated with one another. When you bring an alpha dog into that locker room, and a guy who has a usage rate like Jimmy Butler does, take some time for the wheels to get in motion, as I said earlier. And they're gonna be better down the road. Sixers have a lot of talent. Talent that's good enough to carry them to the Eastern Conference Finals or maybe even further. But again, Embiid and Simmons, they have to be better. I want to segue to this. Moving off of those points, I mentioned Jimmy Butler. I think he's exceeded expectations so far in Philly. His career has gotten off to a fantastic start in the city of brotherly love. He's hit clutch shots, game winners against the Hornets, against the Nets. He's shown that versatility on the offensive and defensive end of the floor. Really, really good defender. He's impressed me more offensively than I thought he was going to. His whole arsenal was on display against the Raptors. 38 points. He was terrific. Put the team on his back, like he's done a couple times so far. And there are times when I say to myself, man, I wish Jimmy Butler would try to take over more. And I think as he continues to carve out his role, he will. Because at the end of the day, he's that creator that the Sixers were missing last year against Boston. The guy you could give the rock to, end of the game, end of the shot clock, and say, hey, go get yours. He is that guy. And he's been outstanding so far for the Sixers. But I was watching that game against the Raptors, and I posed this question to myself. Who would you rather have, Jimmy Butler or Kawhi Leonard? And that's a great debate if you're a Hoops fan and want to discuss with your buddies. And it's funny because both of those guys have similar paths, right? Jimmy Butler coming out of Marquette, Kawhi Leonard coming out of San Diego State. Those guys were overlooked and undervalued. Looked at as somewhat raw prospects. But over the years, through sheer hard work, determination, a love for the game, and a relentless pursuit of greatness, those two dudes have become some of the best players in the league. But who would you rather have? I still give the slight edge to Kawhi Leonard. More experienced. He's won a Finals MVP. He's won a championship. He's been doing it at an elite level longer than Jimmy Butler. I think his offensive game brings more to the table by just a slight edge than Jimmy Buckets. And defensively, I think Kawhi Leonard also has the edge. But it's really, really close. Makes you wonder, what would the Sixers look like with Kawhi Leonard compared to Jimmy Butler? Would there be that much of a gap? I don't know. But I think Kawhi Leonard is a little bit of a better player. But what a display we saw from those two guys the other night. Two prize fighters going blow for blow, round after round, exchanging jabs and punches and uppercuts, and they were just getting buckets. That was the highlight of Wednesday night's game between the Sixers and Raptors. Beautiful performances by Kawhi and Jimmy Butler. And if you're the Sixers, you know Embiid and Simmons are going to get better. The question is, when? Because there's a pressure to win now. You don't go get Jimmy Butler if you don't think you can contend, if you're Elton Brand and Brett Brown. But I'm pretty confident in saying the Sixers, they're going to be in a much better spot later in the year if all of these guys stay healthy, because experience is a really, really important trait for a contender. And that experience will help this team cover up some of the flaws that they have, as well as their talent, and they'll win more games on the road. But as we sit here in early December, you can see there's a gap between the Raptors and the Sixers. There's some work to do. And that's why home court advantage is going to be so crucial in the East. The Sixers right now, they're bullies. They're pretenders, in my opinion. Can they be contenders by the end of the year? Only time will tell.